"Do you know who I am?" the billionaire demanded, flashing her Forbes magazine cover at the royal guard. The guard's response was quiet, devastating, and captured by 100 phones. "Yes, I do. Do you know who you really are?" What followed was the most brutal ego destruction ever witnessed at Buckingham Palace. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we'll bring you another story that will challenge everything you think you know about power, privilege, and what money can't buy. The morning sun cast a golden glow across Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered for the changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood Sophia Blackwell, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer white dress that cost more than most people's annual salary. At 28, she was the youngest person ever to grace Forbes' 30 Under 30 cover, having built a cryptocurrency empire worth $3 billion. Sophia clutched the latest Forbes issue featuring her on the cover, with the headline, "The Crypto Queen Who Conquered Wall Street." She'd bought 50 copies that morning, unable to resist the intoxicating rush of seeing her face on newsstands worldwide. Guard Captain James Whitmore stood at attention near the palace gates, his scarlet uniform immaculate despite the morning heat. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet dignity that comes from noble lineage and military service. What tourists didn't know was that beneath the ceremonial uniform stood the heir to one of Britain's oldest banking fortunes, a family that had financed kings and built empires for 3 centuries. But James had chosen duty over wealth, service over privilege. His grandfather's decision to help struggling entrepreneurs in the 1980s had created fortunes for many, including a young computer programmer named Richard Blackwell, Sophia's father. Mugfie, commanding tone. The morning crowd thickened as Sophia pushed through tourists, her designer heels clicking against ancient cobblestones. She approached Guard Captain Whitmore with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything money could buy. "Excuse me," Sophia called out, her voice carrying that particular tone of wealth, entitled and commanding. Several tourists turned, recognizing her from magazine covers and social media. "You there, in the ridiculous hat." Captain Whitmore remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward in perfect military discipline. This was exactly the kind of challenge he faced daily, tourists trying to break his composure for social media content. Sophia stepped closer, pulling out her phone to film. "I'm talking to you. Do you know who I am?" She held up the Forbes magazine, waving it inches from his face. "See this? That's me, Sophia Blackwell. $3 billion. I probably make more in an hour than you make in a year." The crowd began forming a circle, phones emerging from pockets and purses. The confrontation was already being live-streamed to thousands of followers on her social media accounts. "I bet you've never seen this much money," Sophia continued, pulling out a massive roll of cash held together with a diamond-encrusted money clip. "This is 50,000 pounds. Just pocket money for me." She waved the money close to his face. "Want to know what I could buy with this? Your annual salary, probably." Captain Whitmore's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his position. His military training had prepared him for psychological warfare, but not from entitled billionaires seeking viral moments. "Still not impressed?" Sophia's voice grew louder, sensing the growing audience. "Maybe this will get your attention." She threw the bundle of cash directly at his face. Bills scattered across the cobblestones as tourists gasped in shock. The money hit Captain Whitmore's cheek and fell to the ground around his boots. Several 50-pound notes stuck to his uniform before fluttering away in the morning breeze. The humiliation was captured by dozens of phones, already being uploaded to social media with captions about "Billionaire owns Royal Guard." That's when something shifted in Captain Whitmore's demeanor. His eyes, still fixed forward, seemed to focus with laser intensity. The insult wasn't just personal, it was an assault on everything the uniform represented.
"Pick it up,"
Sophia commanded, pointing at the scattered money. "I said pick it up. That's more money than you'll see in months. Show some gratitude." An American tourist stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, that's really inappropriate. He's doing his job." Sophia spun toward the tourist with fury. "Mind your own business. This is between me and the help." She turned back to Captain Whitmore. I could have you fired with one phone call. I have connections you couldn't dream of. Politicians, business leaders, royalty, they all take my calls."
She pulled out her platinum phone, decorated with genuine diamonds. "One call to my connections in Parliament and you'll be looking for work. Is that what you want? To lose your little dress-up job over pride?" The crowd watched in growing discomfort as Sophia began dialing. "I'm calling my friend who sits on the Defense Committee. He'll love hearing about the disrespectful royal guard who refused to acknowledge a visiting dignitary." But before she could complete the call, sirens began wailing in the distance. Palace security had been monitoring the situation, and throwing objects at the royal guard was a serious offense under British law. "Ma'am, step away from the guard immediately," commanded a stern voice. Inspector Sarah Mitchell of the Metropolitan Police approached with 2 constables, their radios crackling with urgent communications. Sophia's confidence wavered for the first time. "Do you know who I am? I'm Sophia Blackwell. I'm worth $3 billion. This is harassment." "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault on a member of His Majesty's Guard, disturbing the peace, and disorderly conduct," Inspector Mitchell announced, producing handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is ridiculous!" Sophia screamed as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I'll sue all of you! My lawyers will destroy your careers! Do you have any idea what kind of legal team $3 billion can buy?" The crowd watched in stunned silence as one of the world's youngest billionaires was led away in handcuffs, her Forbes magazine lying abandoned on the ground beside the scattered money. That's when Captain Whitmore finally spoke, his voice carrying across the courtyard with quiet authority. "Yes, I do know who you are, Miss Blackwell. The question is, do you know who you really are?" Sophia stopped struggling, something in his tone cutting through her rage. There was knowledge in his voice, recognition that went beyond her magazine covers and media presence. "You're Richard Blackwell's daughter," Captain Whitmore continued, his ceremonial position abandoned as he faced her directly. "The girl whose father built his fortune with help from the Whitmore Banking Trust, the woman who inherited billions but never learned the values that earned them." The color drained from Sophia's face. The Whitmore name was legendary in banking circles, but she'd never connected it to a royal guard. Her father had spoken of the Whitmore Trust with reverence, crediting them with the early investment that launched his technology empire. "My grandfather, Lord Edmund Whitmore, saw potential in a young programmer named Richard Blackwell in 1987. Against all advice, he provided the initial capital that became Blackwell Technologies. Your father never forgot that kindness, that trust in his vision when no one else would listen." Inspector Mitchell paused the arrest, sensing the historical significance of what was unfolding. The crowd had grown to nearly 200 people, all recording this unexpected revelation. "Your fortune, Miss Blackwell, exists because my family believed in merit over pedigree, potential over privilege. My grandfather could have chosen established companies, safe investments. Instead, he chose to help a dreamer with a brilliant idea, but no connections." Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. You're James Whitmore? The Whitmore heir?" "I am Captain James Whitmore, currently serving His Majesty as a royal guard. I chose service over boardrooms, duty over dynasty. The question isn't whether you know my name, it's whether you understand what your name should represent." Before Sophia could respond, a commotion erupted at the palace gates. A convoy of black Range Rovers had arrived, and from the lead vehicle emerged Richard Blackwell himself, silver-haired, distinguished, and clearly in crisis mode. "Sophia!" he called out, rushing toward the scene with his legal team trailing behind. "What have you done?" Richard Blackwell surveyed the scene, his daughter in handcuffs, money scattered on the ground, hundreds of phones recording, and standing amid it all, the unmistakable bearing of a Whitmore. "James!" Richard's voice carried decades of gratitude and current horror. "James Whitmore? My God, I heard Edmund's grandson had joined the military, but I never imagined—" "Mr. Blackwell," Captain Whitmore replied with formal respect. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Richard looked at his daughter, then at the scattered money, understanding immediately what had transpired.
His face cycled through embarrassment, anger, and crushing disappointment. "She threw money at you," he said, his voice breaking. "At a Whitmore, at the grandson of the man who made our family possible." He turned to Sophia with fury. "Do you have any comprehension of what you've done? Any understanding of what this family owes to his?" "Daddy, I didn't know," Sophia began, but Richard cut her off. "You didn't know because you never listened, because you thought money was magic, not the result of honor, partnership, and trust. The Whitmores didn't just give us capital. They gave us credibility when we had none." Inspector Mitchell stepped forward diplomatically. "Sir, while I understand the family history, your daughter did commit several offenses in full view of witnesses and cameras." Richard nodded gravely. "Of course. James, I know I have no right to ask, but is there anything, any way this might be resolved without destroying her future entirely?" Captain Whitmore looked at Sophia, who was now crying silently, her earlier arrogance replaced by genuine remorse and terror at the consequences of her action. Forgiving tone. "Inspector Mitchell," Captain Whitmore said formally, "while Miss Blackwell's actions were inappropriate and illegal, I believe this incident stems from ignorance rather than malice. If she's willing to make a public apology and learn from this experience, I would not oppose alternative resolution." "James, you can't be serious," protested Constable Harris. "She assaulted a royal guard on camera. This will be front-page news regardless." "Which is exactly why this moment matters," Captain Whitmore replied. "If Miss Blackwell is willing to acknowledge her mistakes publicly and take responsibility for her actions, perhaps some good can come from this embarrassment." Richard stepped forward, his relief evident. "James, how can we ever repay such grace? Name any amount." "Mr. Blackwell," Captain Whitmore interrupted gently, "your family has already repaid any debt many times over. Your father's charitable foundation has funded scholarships for military families, built hospitals in underserved areas, and created opportunities for thousands of people. That's the Blackwell legacy I know."
"But surely there's something, some gesture that would be appropriate," Richard insisted, clearly struggling with the debt he felt. Captain Whitmore paused thoughtfully. "Actually, there is something. Miss Blackwell's foundation, I assume she has one, could partner with military charities. Instead of using wealth for viral moments, she could use her platform to highlight causes that matter." Sophia, finally finding her voice, stepped forward despite the handcuffs. "I don't have a foundation. I've been too focused on making money to think about giving it away, but I want to change that. I want to learn what my father learned from your family." "Then perhaps," Captain Whitmore suggested, "this humiliation could become transformation." Inspector Mitchell, after consulting with her superiors via radio, announced her decision. Given the unique circumstances and Captain Whitmore's recommendation, Miss Blackwell will be released with a formal caution. However, she must issue a public apology and commit to community service. As the handcuffs were removed, Sophia rubbed her wrists and looked directly at Captain Whitmore. "I'm sorry, not because I got caught, not because of who you are, but because I forgot who I'm supposed to be. My father taught me better than this." "Apology accepted," Captain Whitmore replied simply. "But the real test isn't what you say today, it's what you do tomorrow." Richard approached Captain Whitmore one final time. "James, I know you refused financial compensation, but would you allow us to establish a foundation in your grandfather's name for military families, veteran support, that sort of thing?" Captain Whitmore smiled, the first expression he'd shown all morning. Lord Edmund would have liked that very much. He always said the best investment was in people, not portfolios. As the crowd began to disperse and the viral videos spread across social media, a different narrative emerged than anyone expected. Instead of "Billionaire humiliates royal guard," the story became how a moment of shame became a lesson in honor. Sophia would indeed establish the Edmund Whitmore Foundation, which would go on to provide educational opportunities for military families worldwide. She would spend the following year learning about her father's journey, understanding that wealth without wisdom is just numbers on a screen. Captain Whitmore returned to his post, resuming his ceremonial duties with the same dignity he'd maintained throughout the ordeal. But tourists now looked at him differently, not as a silent statue, but as a reminder that honor and heritage aren't displayed on magazine covers,
but lived through daily choices. The scattered money was collected and donated to military charities, a fitting end to wealth that had been used as a weapon rather than a tool for good. What would you have done in Captain Whitmore's position? Sometimes the greatest power isn't in responding to disrespect with force, but in transforming humiliation into education. Sometimes the most brutal ego destruction comes not from revenge, but from showing someone who they could become instead of who they are. If this story challenged your assumptions about wealth, power, and character, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove true nobility isn't inherited, it's earned through service, dignity, and the courage to choose honor over ego. Hit that notification bell because tomorrow we'll bring you another story about the moment when privilege meets principle and discover which one truly has the power to change the world.